What's up, everyone? This is a very special 49ers Power Hour. And I'm your host, Sasha D. Robinson. And right now, I was just listening to one of my old videos I made a couple of years ago. And one of my videos I did was about the 7 teams I hate in the NFL. Teams that I will never stand for and I will never root for. And I went on this big contrived about one team. And I spent most of the video just talking about how much I hate them. And I didn't really talk about the team that I hate the most. But I went and I talked about this one team, and I was like talking about how I hated them and the reason why I hate them, and I went down the line, and then I went back and I started thinking about this more and more, and I watched that video, and I was like, my list has changed, my feelings have changed, and I have to fix this because it's not really fair to the team I hate the most. And I don't really care for this team anymore. And the team I'm referring to is the Dallas Cowboys. One of my friends on Facebook, where I met her on a 49er fan page, and we're on our fan post right now, 49ers, Fear the 49ers faithful right now, and I talked about a team I hate, teams I hate the most a couple of months ago, and she said, "Don't forget about the Cowgirls." And I had said fine wine. I call her fine wine because she's an older woman, and she's probably, I want to say she's in her late 50s, early 60s. I don't know, but she doesn't look like she's aged. You know how they say wine ages like fine wine. That's the way that's why I called her, like fine wine. It's like fine wine. I actually don't care about the Cowboys. I had to really think about that. I don't care about them anymore. I really don't care about them. Yeah, there were rivalries, and there was hurt, in the games back in the 90s when I was a teenager. But when I look back at it, those two games that the 49ers and the Cowboys that played against each other at that time, they hurt, but through time I just stopped caring. The Cowboys were an up and young coming team. The 49ers were an older team, and they were just getting beat up by the young guys. They needed Deion Sanders to help get over the hump in '94. So it hurt, but I don't care because throughout the years, there's nothing really for me to hold on to be like, yeah, that hate just is still there because I had to think back about other recent games. I don't care about them. So the Cowboys are off the list. They're really off the list. I don't care for the Cowboys anymore. And I did an article because I'm also a writer for the 49er Web Zone. And I did one about the unsung rivalry, and that's between the 49ers and the Eagles. And by the time of this recording, they're playing at 3:00 my time, Central Standard Time. And this is going to be the second time that they play. But it wasn't just the playoff games that is like okay, but it's also those regular season games that were really hurtful. I had to put them on the list because I didn't realize there were some heartbreaks between both sides where both teams where it's like there's really a rivalry there. So the Eagles actually made that list. Another team that was on my list and I had to take off was the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers was another one of those young teams that came in and they beat the 49ers around a couple of times. But then I took them off. Why? Because when they were there, they punked the 49ers for a couple of years, and the 49ers were like, okay, you guys had your fun, and then they started beating up on them, and they went on a good stretch. Yeah, they had a couple of good back and forth, but there was nothing really there where you can be able to be like, yeah, I hate this team. The only reason why I didn't like them was because they were old NFC West rivalries, and at that time I felt like you were rivals, but there's nothing for me to hold on to. So I had to look back and I thought about it. Another team, the Green Bay Packers. And again, both teams, heartbreaks. Both teams have hurt each other in the playoffs in the regular season. And you can really remember how hurtful those games were. Where you're like, God darn it. Man, I can't stand these Packers. Every time they play each other in the playoffs and in the regular season, it meant something, and it was and they broke your heart on both times. There and you had to think long and hard about that. And it has nothing to do with now. It's like, well, no, the 49ers have owned them in the playoffs. So what? There was a stretch when the Packers were owning the 49ers, and my hurt was there. And then there was the regular season when they was a stretch also. When the 49ers started getting them also, it's just like it's payback. Now, remember how y'all did what the Packers did to Niners? The Niners are doing it to the Packers. That's cool. So I had to think long about that. So they're on the list also. So I'm going to go through my list and I'm going to explain the reason why the teams I hate the most. And I'm going off the cuff because it's always better sometimes to go with your feelings instead of just it seem like you're rehearsing it. And if you have a team that you hate the most, I would love to hear from your list as well. Why do you hate them? Don't just say, well, because it's just team. Yeah, well, it's just that team, but whatever. So I would love to hear from you. So let me go ahead and explain mine. The first team is the punk-ass Los Angeles Rams. Let's go ahead and let's give it up to them. They will always be number one. From 1989 till present, I can remember those feelings of watching the Rams and the 49ers battling it out. I remember the first time I ever experienced that game. It was a game with John Taylor. He scored those 2 90-yard touchdown receptions. I only saw one because I went to bed early. I was still a kid and I had to go to bed early, so I didn't see the second one because when I woke up and I found out there were 2 of them, I was like, wow, really? Niners were down that game also. So I went to bed expecting the 49ers to have lost that game, but they came back and won. But because the Rams were punking the 49ers. The 49ers were actually the better team, but the Rams came out. It was at Anaheim. Wrote an article about that as well for the 49er web zone. I'll reference that and put that in the link as well if you'd like to read about it. But it's also on there, but you can also watch the game online, on YouTube. They do a good job of breaking it down. But I can remember watching that game, and I can remember watching there were games when the Rams were not better than the 49ers, and they beat them. Then they always gave the 49ers their best shot. There was a stretch when the 49ers were always beating the Rams, always beating them back in the 90s. And then the game that where my hatred just really just amped up to I hate you was in 1999 when the Greatest Show on Turf buried my dynasty that I grew up with. When they buried them, Steve Young was out that game. They went in with Jeff Garcia. The Greatest Show on Turf was reeling with Kurt Warner, Oz Hakeem, Isaac Holt, Torrey Holt, Marshall Falk, Tony Horn. That defense was just flying. The 49ers did not have an answer for them, and they buried them. And then they went on a stretch where they were always being the 49ers, and then they started balancing everything out. I hate the Rams to this day. I don't like. There's nothing about them that makes me I will ever cheer for them. I watched them the other day lose to the Panthers, and I was just hoping, please, Carolina. I don't like. Beat them. I hate them. The Panthers are so close, and they just couldn't pull it off. The young team that was so close. And my hatred for them just really is just amped up. So it's just again, you just got what my hatred for them is just always about heartbreak and just remembering those memorable games where you're just like, yeah, I remember, yeah, this game really got it right here to the point to again, you have to acknowledge their greatness, but again, I just can never cheer for them. My number 2 team is the other punk-ass team, the Seattle Seahawks, or I call them the Seattle Seabags. Now, my hatred for them didn't start until 2011, and the only reason why they're up so high is because they're NFC West rivals, and it's just the fact that how at that time with Legion of Boom, and how they were just constantly beating up on the 49ers, watching those heartbreaks, and when that my hatred for them just really amped up it was a Sunday night game when the Seahawks, or the Seabags, I'm sorry, they were riding high. They were blowing out everyone. The 49ers were the division leaders, and everybody was thinking the 49ers did go to Super Bowl that year, but the 49ers they were going through Colin Kaepernick. He was now their starting quarterback, and they were playing the Seahawks. They were 3 games in. I want to say they were 3 games in, or 3 or 4 games in, with Colin Kaepernick being the starting quarterback. They went on a good stretch. They beat Chicago. They beat the Saints. I believe they tied someone. I have to look it up. I want to say that they tied the Rams. And they were going through a stretch but the Seahawks were riding high. They blasted Arizona. They went up to Buffalo and blasted them. They were beating everyone. And that game, the 49ers did not have an answer, not one bit. And all I keep thinking is I'm glad the 49ers had a lead, had a good division lead on the Seahawks, because right now, the way how the 49ers are playing and the way how the Seahawks are playing, the Seabags, the 49ers when if they had to go up to Quest Field, they would have gotten obliterated in the playoffs. And the Seahawks had to go, and in the playoffs, the Seahawks had to face the Falcons. And and all I kept thinking was, if the 49ers have to play the Seahawks, they're going to lose. That's all I kept thinking about in that playoff game. They had to play the Falcons. The Falcons were lucky enough to hold off the Seahawks. And the 49ers went through with the Packers, which I'll talk about in a moment. It was a real good game with the Packers. I was thankful that the 49ers was able to hold off the Packers. I'm glad that the Falcons, and we'll talk about them too as well, were able to hold off the Seabags. But there was that stretch when they were just going around. It was like the 49ers could not beat them until 2019. I believe they only beat them like about a half. I want to say 2 or 3 times. Again, I'm going off the cuff. I have to look at the records. But it was like the Seabags were just constantly punking the 49ers, and my hatred for them just grew and grew and grew and grew. Even when it got to 2019 and when Richard Sherman signed with the 49ers, I didn't like it at all. When the 49ers beat them for number 1 in the division and the number 1, I was relieved. And then there was the stretch of the 49ers were beating the Seahawks, and they were blasting them, and it looked effortlessly until recently, where the Seahawks are like, nah, not today. This is where a true rivalry is, where you can be able to just say, yeah, teams are evenly matched. Who can really go at it? It doesn't seem like it's one-sided, and I hate them, and my hate for them just grows and grows to the point that my cousin stays up in Seattle, and if he were to come up and talk to me and, like, hey, come on down here, we'll come up here, and we'll go to a Seahawks game. And, yeah, now I'm chilling. But let me back up. I always wanted to go to Quest Field because I wouldn't mind wanting to experience how light the 12s are. But I hate you. Let's just make sure we got that straight. Just like I wouldn't mind wanting to go to SoFi because I like the way how I like the way how the stadium looks, but I hate the Rams. I'll go to a Chargers game, but I can't sit next to a Rams fan. I'm sorry, I can't do that. So we're going to go to number 3, and number 3 are the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said before, there were some heartbreak there, and they're an unsung rivalry that nobody ever talks about. Everybody always talks about, like, the Cowboys. No, the Cowboys are not rivalry. People just hate them. A lot of people hate the Cowboys because of the fans, how obnoxious the fans are, and I was one of them. But when I started looking back at it, who cares about what the fans say? There's a lot of obnoxious fans out here in the world. Packer fans are obnoxious. Eagles fans are horse-shitting eating fans. But Philadelphia Eagles, there is a lot of heartbreak. Going back to 1989, we're going to go back to my favorite year when the 49ers played the Eagles. The first time you had to look at it, when they were punking the 49ers, and they were up 21-3 going into the fourth quarter, and Joe Montana threw 4 touchdown passes to one to John Taylor that sparked it, 2 to Jerry Rice. He threw 2 to Jerry Rice in the game. He threw one to him in the first quarter, one in the fourth quarter, another touchdown pass. He threw to Brent Jones, one to Tom Rathman. Defense showed up, but this whole game, though, the 49er defense stepped up. But then you have to always look back at to 1993 when the Eagles, were manhandling the better 49er team, and they went in with the backup quarterback, Jim McMahon, who, when I remember watching that game, I'm thinking, yeah, Jim McMahon, whatever. You see, this is before the internet and everything. I had to go by with what I saw and not knowing who Jim McMahon was. I started watching football. I may have watched football back in 85, 86, but I didn't start really paying attention to it until I was in sixth grade. I didn't know Jim McMahon. He knew how to throw the ball. I didn't know that. Every time I saw Jim McMahon, he was always handing off the ball to Walter Payton. I've never seen him be a gunslinger, so he shredded that 49er defense on that Monday night game where the Eagles barely won the game, but of the fact of that they manhandled them. They were going to fast forward to next year where the Eagles beat up on the eventual 49er Super Bowl champions 40-8 at Candlestick. 40-8. Charlie Garner ran all over him. It was a horrible game. And you know what? I'm glad I didn't watch the game. I am thankful I didn't watch the game. I was working at a Sidewalk Cafe, but I called my best friend Jabri Jones, asked him, hey, what's the score? And he said the 49ers are down 31-0. I'm like, what? And then I'm like, are you serious? He's like, no, I'm serious. They're down. They're losing. So he put his dad on the phone, Mr. Jim Jones. Jim said, yeah, the 49ers are losing. Matter of fact, the Eagles are threatening again. I remember that. And got home, so I was 40-8. I wanted to cry. And then the 49ers struggled against the Lions, and they were lucky enough to beat them. And then the 49ers went on that big stretch where they were just blasting everybody left and right. So, but again, you remember that game and that feeling, right? And then got to go in the play when the 49ers played them in the playoffs, and they beat them 14-0, and that was in the 1996-97 playoffs. But if I recall, I want to say Ty Detmer was the starting quarterback that game. And for the Eagles, the 49ers barely escaped that one. Then they lost to the Packers. Going to circle back to them. and then, you have to look back to 2001 when the 49ers were lucky enough to beat the Eagles. The Eagles were riding high. The 49ers, they were winning, but it was like one of those, they won the game, but it was 6-3 going into the fourth quarter. They had one of the best goal line stands ever. Look it up. 2001, the Eagles versus the 49ers at Candlestick. Donovan McNabb, Deuce Staley. When I looked up how the goal line stand looked, defense was monster, led by linebacker Derek Smith and Jeff Ulbrich. I was in awe, and I was like, yeah, you already know what's up. And then the 49ers went down after the goal line stand. They went down the field. Jeff Garcia, quarterback, threw a touchdown pass to Terrell Owens, extended the lead. Game was pretty much over. Then the Eagles pretty much owned the 49ers for a couple of years, and then the 49ers came back, led by Alex Smith, and he was able. And when they were down 24-3 going into halftime, Alex Smith decided to say, F you. He grabbed his Utah Utes, and the 49ers were able to just go back and pick that defense apart. Put Michael Vick in his place, who was pretty much owning them that first half, and the 49ers was able to just put it away. Then you could go back to when they played each other in 2000. Was it 9? Yeah, it was 19 because of the year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl. And was it? No, it wasn't 2019. It was 2000. It was 20. It was 20. I want to say it was 21. 21. It was 21. And the 49ers beat the Eagles. Yeah, the 49ers beat the Eagles in a week 2 matchup. And that was when Jalen Hurts, he pretty much how can I say this? Didn't look Jalen Hurts, if you know what I mean. The 49ers pretty much owned them. It was a pretty hard defensive game. And then we could go with the playoff game that happened in 20 and the playoffs of 23, in the NFC Championship game when the Eagles destroyed the 49ers 31 to the 8, 31 to 7, I'm sorry. And we could always say, well, Brock Purdy went out. They didn't have a backup quarterback. And you know something? I think the Eagle fan was funny. Well, you know what? Protect your quarterback. There's nothing you can do about it. True. Because if he's gone, who else do you have? So I can't knock him for that. But the problem is that when you make stupid comments like that, and I'm gonna find a link to that and post that in here also. If you talk about that, and you're over here like, oh, my quarterback, your quarterback. Well, you need to protect him. That's right. We're Philadelphia. We're real men play football. And then you turn around and play them the next year, and then you get blasted 42-21. I believe it was 42-21, 13. I've got to look up the score. I'll correct myself on that. You got to eat that. Just like your horse shit eaters are Philadelphia Eagles are known for eating horse shit. And especially when they win Super Bowls, they go around eating horse shit. And that's not me just saying that just to be mean. It's a fact. Look it up. After they won back in 18, and when they won back in 18, some Philadelphia Eagle fan decided to eat horse shit. And you know what? That's all I look at you right now. You bunch of horse shit eaters. Just because you won a Super Bowl, congratulations, you won. Hell, this is before my hatred for you, where I was indifferent. So I cheer. So you know what? I cheered. Why? Because I didn't want to hear nothing about New England Patriots and ESPN and NFL Network getting all on Tom Brady. Oh, Tom Brady. Oh, Tom Brady. I'm glad. But you know something? Y'all a bunch of horse shit eaters. You know what? And we're Philadelphia, where real men play, and you're coming back. And they turn around and get blasted. Made fun of Brock Purdy, calling him a geek. The man threw 4 touchdown passes. Picked that defense apart. So this week, at the time of this recording, I love it. I love now that both teams have a blowout on each side since Brock Purdy has took over. At the time of this recording, they're 1-1. 49ers got their ass whooped in the NFC Championship. 49ers, and then the next year, the 49ers ruined the Eagles season. Because you know something? A lot of people don't talk about this. Because that next year, the Eagles fell apart. And they hadn't been the same since that ass whooping. They couldn't hold on to the number 1 division. They fell apart. The 49ers ended up winning. The Eagles fell apart and lost against Arizona, who they were sitting there blasting that whole game, and then the Cardinals came back and won that game. 49ers took number 1. The Eagles limped into the playoffs. 49ers went on to the Super Bowl, and they were a stupid play calls away from being 6-time Super Bowl champions. But that's another discussion for another time. But you know something? That's where the hatred comes from, where you can remember stuff like that, and you can just get that fire in there. Then we're gonna go ahead and go to number 4, the Atlanta Falcons. Why? Remember, just like I was saying, you can remember games where it's just like where the hatred just started boiling up, and you're like, yeah, and it keeps riding with you, and throughout the years, you can keep remembering these games. Yeah, they're not in the NFC West anymore, but you still remember. But there are still games where you're just like, wow, this it just boils up, and they have those classic games where no matter what. Yeah, we could go ahead and say that back in the 90s, where back in 1991, the 49ers had when they didn't make the playoffs that year, but they still went 10-6. The Falcons, 2 legit Falcons, they were punking the 49ers that year. There was a Hail Mary, Michael Haynes. I was telling my son about this. In that same game, John Taylor caught a 97-yard touchdown pass. And then turn around, they had the game at hand. And then I want to say it was Chris Miller. I have to look it up. Again, I'm going off the cuffs. Chris Miller threw a Hail Mary where Michael Haynes caught it. and he caught it, and they beat the 49ers that game. Heartbreaker. There's also a game in '93 when I always think when everybody always say who's the best out of the matchup, who wins, Jerry Rice or Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders had a game against on Jerry Rice. Jerry Lee is my favorite player of all time, but that game, Deion Sanders had really had a manhandle, and he was a difference maker in that game. The Falcons won that game, and another reason why is because nobody could stop Andre Rison. He was all over that 49er secondary. You want to know why I say Deion Sanders, owned him? Because the next year, Deion Sanders went to the 49ers. And guess who was on Andre Rison? Guess who you forgot was on the field? Yeah, if you're going to say that Andre Rison was on the field, did he play? We don't know. Because, again, Deion Sanders took him away. This was defensive MVP, Deion Sanders, who took him away. 49ers, destroyed him in 2 games, and those 2 games. And then, we can say that they were the stretch where the 49ers were beating them. But in 95, and I forgot about this because I actually thought the 49ers won this game. To this day, it was like 2 years ago, I actually thought to this day the 49ers won this game. It was 95. It was for the number 1 seed. They had to win this game. And what did they do? They went into the Georgia Dome. And they could not put the Falcons away. Bobby Hebert picked that defense apart, and they went on to win that game. The 49ers are just coming off a Super Bowl victory. They limped into the playoffs for the 2nd seed, and they got destroyed by the Packers again. Going to circle back to them. But you definitely can remember that hurt that they had at that time. You can remember those things, those games. You can remember with Jamal Anderson when he was sitting there just going through that defense and just killing them. I mean, he was definitely killing the 49ers, killing them. When Michael Vick took over, he was just running all up and down the 49 up on the 49ers secondary. I mean, defense. He was just killing the 49ers defense. Chris Chandler, nobody ever really talks about Chris Chandler as a quarterback, but if there was one of the best, they say the thing about game manager or game changer, one of the best game managers of all time. I've watched him. Remember the first time I ever saw Chris Chandler was when he was in Arizona. Chris Chandler had the start of the game when he was starting with the Arizona Cardinals, and they played the Cowboys. The Cowboys jumped out on Arizona, but Chris Chandler found a way to creep back into the game, and they sat there and they were close to. They could have won that game. Nobody ever gives him a lot of credit about that. And when he took over in Atlanta, they got to Super Bowl when Minnesota jumped out on them in the NFC Championship game. The Falcons, Chris Chandler managed the game, did a great job. And they got into the Super Bowl. The problem is that when they got into the Super Bowl, when you're too busy being a ball control team and you're going up against a high octane team like the Denver Broncos, who can play, who they can do it other way they want. You can either go ball control with them, or they can blow you out. The Falcons is just one. We're just going to ball control you. We're not going to blow you out. We'll blow you out, but it isn't going to be like a quick strike. Denver was that. You're not going to go point for point with just that, with that methodical, especially if your defense can't stop them. So that's just one thing. And plus, it was John Elway's last game. But I digressed. Then we could go ahead and we could talk about the game, the NFC Championship game, NFC Championship game, where the 49ers were able to, lucky enough to beat them. Yeah, because the Falcons jumped out on them 17-0. If that game would have went to 24-0, it would have been impossible. But they jumped out on them 17-0. 49ers were able to creep back into the game, led by Colin Kaepernick. He made some precise throws. They controlled the ball, and their defense was lucky enough to get a good goal line, a good stand to stop Tony Gonzalez from catching that ball, or was it Julio Jones? One of those guys do it. I'll have to look that game up. And then they were able to get a Super Bowl appearance, and that's a subject that I don't talk about. the Super Bowl. And then, but then, again, I had to look at some recent games also where you're like, God darn it, when the 49ers, they were up. The 49ers are the best team in the NFC, facing the Falcons, who a lot of people were talking about how they were reeling, and who can, like, they had no business being on the same field with them. And what happened? Julio Jones leaned into the end zone and beat the Falcons beat the 49ers, the team that they had no business beating. Oh my, great googly moogly. That pains me to talk about that. So you can talk about this, and that, again, that's all the pain that you have to remember. Remember, this is the heated. The 49ers had beaten the Falcons a couple of times as well, but you just remember that pain. Then we're going to go to number 5, and that is the Orlean Saints. Is there something like, it's just like so insignificant that it's like you don't really pay attention to it, but when you look at something, you're like, oh my God. It's just like this boil. Let's say like you have like this mole or this scar, and you don't pay attention to it for years, but one day you look at it and you're like, oh my God, look at how ugly that this look. That's what I have. Like when I got the chicken pox, I have a scar on my wrist. Don't even notice it. Wouldn't even notice it at all. But one day I look at it like, God, this is just so ugly. I'm like that. That's what I feel about the New Orleans Saints. It's there. But you don't really pay attention to it until one day you're just like, you look at them like, oh my God, I can't stand you. Yeah, there are a lot of games that the Saints had where you like that there was heartbreak, but it's nothing like where there were playoff games that hurt you. Now, the only reason why they're above the other two is because they were old NFC West rivals, and it's just. And you remember some of those, you have some of those memorable games where it just bothers you to death. And one of the things is another reason why I give the Saints so much respect is because one of the best linebacking crew that I will always say is one of the best. And I can't stand this team. I'm going to say right now, I don't like the New Orleans Saints. I think the worst of them. But one of the reasons why I will always give the New Orleans Saints their respect is the Dome Patrol. And I will say that's one of the best linebacking crew of all time. And you got to give them their respect. That's Ricky Jackson, Von Johnson, Sam Mills, and Pat Swilling. And I mean, they were terrors. And watching them just destroy teams, even my favorite team, you got to give them that respect. And then, the 49ers, there was the stretch where the 49ers were just destroying the Saints. I mean, destroying them. But and I loved it. But then when the Saints realized, hey, we can play with these guys. And they had Deuce McAllister, and they started, just getting all in them. I don't believe that they're the game where Ricky Williams was there and they were destroying them. I don't believe Jeff Blake or Aaron Brooks were doing anything. I do know Joe Horn had a couple of games against the 49ers. But then when Drew Brees got to the helm, Drew Brees was destroying my favorite team. Destroying them. And, I mean, they was just going around just destroying them. Then there was that game where when it was back in the 2012 season when the 49ers went to New Orleans, and this was Colin Kaepernick's second starting game, which I was kind of scared of. Like, man, this is going to probably be back to life, back to reality. But instead, the 49ers actually won that game. They terrorized them. Then they turn around the next game, and then they beat them then they beat them again. But then they turn around. They had that infamous PI game where Ahmad Brooks sacked Drew Brees, but then they said it was personal foul, roughing the passer. And all this. That was just one of the worst of the worst. The Saints won that game. The 40, there was also the infamous one of the best games, the catch three in the playoffs. I'm fast forwarding over. You can't forget about that game, the catch three, where the 49ers were, defensively were all over. We're all over the Saints, but you can't hold. You can, as what Chucky said one day, you can't hold a good guy down because Drew Brees was just picking them apart. I mean, he was picking the defense apart. 49ers went up 17-0. Then the Saints came back, took the lead, and the 49ers were able to get it back. Went back and forth. Alex Smith hit Vernon Davis for that touchdown pass with 12 seconds left. Thank God they were able to hold on to win, because in this day and age, 12 seconds don't mean nothing anymore. So that's one thing. When it was 12 seconds, you felt comfortable. Now 12 seconds don't mean nothing anymore. So we can honestly say that now. I'll say that where you can just remember that now. Recently, there's nothing really memorable with both teams playing each other. Now where you could be like, yeah, this happened here, and now this is painful. There was nothing really all that meaningful like this last year they played in week 2. The 49ers limped into the game, but they were able to, luckily they held on to that game. But the thing is that there were some memorable games. Now, with my number 6 team is the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. As I said before, the Green Bay Packers made the list. Why did the Packers make this list? Simple. Because, again, memories, hurt, disappointments, hatred. Brett Favre picked that team apart back in 1995 in the playoffs. 1996, actually, the 95 season, but 1996. 49ers were the number 2 seed. Packers destroyed Atlanta coming into that game. 49ers should have won that game, but instead, Brett Favre destroyed that 49er team. The defense did not have an answer. 49ers offense could not get that running game going. Everything went wrong that went wrong. Then we could go back to the next season where the Packers again manhandled the 49ers. This time that was up there in Lambeau Field, or in the frozen tundra. And the 49ers went into that game. Steve Young went out. Elvis Gearback came in. They had no answer for that game. We can even go to the Monday night game where the 49ers jumped out on them. The Packers came back and won. Then we'll fast forward to that playoff game I just started talking about. The 49ers could not stop them. It was really, really a bad game. I hated them. I hated the Packers. It was not hatred and all that much, but I hated them. Then the next year, the 49ers and Packers played each other in the NFC Championship game. The 49ers had home field advantage. They got manhandled in that game. Manhandled. Only way how they scored, Chuck Levy ran a kickoff back. But the week before, they were putting up points against Minnesota. They could not stop. But they could not do anything against those Packers. The 49ers finally got their get back in 1998 with the catch 2 when Steve Young hit Terrell Owens with seconds left to be able to finally get over the hump. Finally did. I remember watching that game. I was listening to it throughout the day because I was trying to get my car fixed because I was going to be going off to school. My car wasn't working, so I had to get it fixed because I needed to get to San Angelo. And I'm listening to it on the radio. My friends were sitting there driving me back and forth, getting me to AutoZone, getting parts to it. I really appreciate them helping me out with that. But listening to it, and then I came home, and I remember watching Antonio Freeman catch a touchdown pass with about a couple of minutes left for the Packers to take the lead. And what happened afterwards? Steve Young had a methodical drive to get the 49ers into position with seconds left, almost slipped and fell, got back, stepped up into the pocket, threw it into the end zone where Terrell Owens, who was dropping passes all game, caught that one. That was humble Terrell Owens who caught that pass. He was leading the team in receptions and touchdowns over Jerry Lee Rice that game also. And I was so happy. I was excited. I scared my mom because I was happy. Anybody knows me, how I am watching those 49er games. The catch, too. Finally got over the hump. But then we get to the next year in 2001. I know I'm skipping some games here. We're going to the playoff game, another playoff game into the 2001 season where the 49ers and the Packers played each other. Jeff Garcia led them, and it was a real close game. The 49ers limped into the game. They didn't limp into the game, but too many mistakes cost them that game. They were still in the game, walking down the field. Jeff Garcia forced the ball to T.O. Ball was picked off. And I believe it was like a minute something left. They were walking down the field. Jeff Garcia forced the ball down the field. Didn't have to force it out there. And what happened? The ball was picked off. 49ers had no business in that game. Packers actually were really, it was really the Packers game. 49ers stuck around. One of those games where, too many mistakes. You look back at like, yeah, I can see where this happened. Then like through the regular season, the Packers were getting on them. There was that game when T.O. caught a touchdown pass. He did the pom-pom dance, and I'm over here right now doing it so you can picture me doing that. But the thing is that the Packers won that game. I remember watching that game, and I remember the way how the game looked. It was just really freaking bad. And then I remember watching the way how every time they played each other afterwards, how the Packers would just constantly just punk the 49ers. And right now while I'm talking again, I'm off the cusp. I don't remember the Packers actually beating the 49ers during the stretch. I remember the game in the 2009 season, when Alex Smith, who was pretty much, to the 2010 season, when Alex Smith came in for relief, when Sean Hill, he looked like he was inept, and they sprung some life into that 49er offense. They went into Green Bay. Packers were punking them, but then Alex Smith came back, and they were real close to winning the game. You remember those games, huh? I remember it. Packers won that game though because the 49ers couldn't make the defense couldn't make the key play down the stretch. Packers won, but it was a close game. But then there was a ray of life. A ray of light, as I would say. When the 49ers started getting up back at the Packers, and it felt so good when they beat them in the 2012 playoffs and the divisional round. And then the next year, up there in Lambeau this time, the 49ers had to go up there in the divisional round to get to the NFC Championship game. And they beat them with the field goal. And you want to know something else that there's something else that I also want to think about as well. 49ers gave me one of the best birthday gifts of all time. It was my 41st birthday. No, it was my 41st birthday. No, 42nd. 42nd birthday. And the 49ers played on my birthday. And what happened? Me and a group of friends, we went to Twin Peaks. We all had drinks. We went out. My brothers came out. Good friends came out. It was one of the best days of my life. And I watched the 49ers blast the Packers. They blasted them. And you know what happened? 6 years later? The Packers returned the favor on my birthday again. And this time, 49ers limped into Lambeau Field. The Packers gave me the worst birthday present of all time, watching the 49ers get blasted and over there. That is what a rivalry is about. Where you love and hate, that you watch that favorite team and they could just basically love, and you will just hurt as well. Real rivalry right there. And this is why they just crept back into that. This is why they are on my list. When you have those rivalries right there, when you see that hurt, and you have that love right there, they either love you or they break your heart. And then we're going to go to the NFC Championship game in the 2019-2020 season when they destroyed the Packers. Boy, me and my son was jumping up and down, happy about that game. Just the way how they were just abusing every time Aaron Rodgers dropped back. Somebody was in his face. Oh, it felt so good. But then there was 2 years later in Lambeau when the Packers actually should have beat the 49ers because the 49ers offense couldn't do nothing. But they stuck around. And thanks to a special teams block punt. And then we returned to it for a touchdown. And then with that key 3rd and 7 that was handed off to Deebo Samuel, where he ran up the middle to get the first. They were able to milk the clock for Robbie Gould to kick that field goal. It's good. I didn't really watch the game because I was so destroyed. But it felt good to beat those damn Packers. 49ers lost the NFC Championship game to the bitch-ass Rams. But that's another story for another time where I'll talk about that one. But the point is, it felt good, didn't it? So that is another team that I can honestly say that I don't like. You can remember, you could have those feelings, those up and downs. And then let's talk about my last one, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. The only reason why they're on this list is because they're NFC West division rivals. That's it. There is nothing really there to be like, why do you hate the Cardinals? They're NFC West rivals. There's no game that can really come to me that I'm just thinking about it. You're on this list because you're there. You play in the NFC West. Then there are no heartbreakers there. It's either a win or a loss. Plus, has never been on the line where you could just be like, yeah, like the other games I could talk about. There is nothing memorable where you're like, oh my God, man, these Cardinals, these damn bitch ass Cardinals, man, I can't stand these chumps. There's nothing there. The only reason why you're on this list is because you're NFC West rivals. That's it. There's nothing else. I'm right now as we talk, and I've been thinking about this list for about a month now, and I'm going thoroughly telling you about games that I'm like, I remember this. But when it comes to the Cardinals, there's nothing there. When the Cardinals came back and beat the 49ers, that was before my time. 1992, the Cardinals beat the 49ers, and the 49ers went up. They had they finished the season 14-2. One of their losses was to the Arizona Cardinals. But when I looked at, it's not that game was not as bad as the score says it is. The Cardinals beat them by double digits. But when you look at the way how the game played, you could be like, dang, the Cardinals really didn't dominate the 49ers that game. 49ers just beat themselves, and the Cardinals just somehow just lucked into it. Because the Cardinals, they had a shitty season. They beat them though. Yeah, congratulations. I'll give you a clap, an applause. Okay, cool, you got them. You have to capitalize on it. But to me, it's just like that doesn't warrant it. There's a lot of those games where you can be like, yeah, the better team lost, but there were circumstances. It wasn't like you sat there and you were methodical, picked them apart, destroyed, dominated the game. It wasn't a close game where you capitalized on mistake, where you really, flexed your muscles. It was more like, dang, yeah, you guys won. Congratulations. It was nothing really to write home about. Well, yeah, you can write home about it because you beat a 14-2 team, and then that's one of the losses. that the 49ers had that game, but it's nothing else. As you can see, talk about that game, but there's too many of them. Other than that, I've sat here and I've been thinking over and over and over and over. There's nothing about it. We could talk about the Monday night game when the 49ers beat the Cardinals, but again, that's just another game. I mean, it's a game. The 49ers were up and coming, starting to come around saying they are a playoff team. They didn't make the playoffs that year, but still. Again, the Cardinals, I believe there were 2 years. I want to say that they were a couple of years removed from a Super Bowl appearance, and they were with Kurt Warner, and Alex Smith was still trying to figure himself out because with all the coordinators, head coaches, it was a big cluster. But that doesn't warrant that there was anything memorable. So I'm sorry to say, Cardinals, you made the list, yeah, by default because you're NFC West rivals. And if they were doing linemen again, and I'm pretty sure my list will probably change, and you probably won't be on the list, and I'll probably pick a team like if I'm just going to just go off the cusp right now and just say, what team could probably take over the Arizona Cardinals? I ain't got none right now. I mean, I've been thinking long and hard about it. No, I got none. So, I mean, you're there. Congratulations. You made the list just by default. You ain't nothing. You ain't shit to me. You're just there just because you're rivals. There's nothing that was memorable. There's no playoff performances. There were no games when they were on the line. There's no games. We could talk about certain games. You could tell me that, yeah, there were certain games that happened. Yeah. Like I said, they're the big comeback when the 49ers jumped out on them 24-0, and the Cardinals came back and won. But that was before I started watching football. And then again, I just talked about the Monday night game that they had, that the Cardinals had. There's a couple of games that I can remember. Yeah, there was the game when Colin Kaepernick got so exposed. I'm over here just mad at this guy. He's throwing interceptions. I believe he threw four interceptions that game. One was returned, but that doesn't warrant hatred. That's just a game. It happened. That's not like one of those, oh, I hate you, Cardinals. I just hate you. That's because you're division rivals. That's just it. You got to play you got to play your division. You step up to play your division rivals. So that's just it. That is my top 7 list. If you have any questions or concerns about my list, you don't agree, you disagree with them, hey, tell me about it. If you have your own list, like I said, write about it. Put it in the comment section. Tell me exactly why about your list. Why do you hate them? Don't just say, I just hate the team. Why do you hate them? Is there anything memorable about it? Let's talk about it. Anything about this? Is there as a team that should be higher? If you agree with me and you would rearrange, how would you redo the list? I'd love to hear from everyone about this. And, I'm going to try to do more of these. I'm going to try to do more for my for the website, so you can be able to have some more content out there. Be sure to, I am Sasha D. Robinson, with Anger Management Production with the 49ers Power Hour. And again, I'm going to try to get some more content out. We can be able to talk about this. And until then, everyone, have yourself a great day and go Niners.